There's actually some good news coming out of the Walt Disney Company. The Haunted Mansion director was recently talking about the film in an interview with Fandango, and he said that it only gets richer the truer we are to the source because the source is inspired. Shocking that someone from Disney is actually saying that if you're going to adapt something, you should adapt it from the source. And the closer you are to the source, the better it's probably going to be because the source was inspired in the first place. Wow. We're finally hearing this coming from someone out of the Walt Disney Company. But before we get to the director's comments, I do want to provide some context because we also have Lakeith Stanfield and Rosario Dawson also talking about the film in kind of this manner during an interview with Fandango while they're promoting the film. So let's get with Lakeith Stanfield's comments first. He says, I'm a big fan of things that are true to source material, and I experienced the ride. That's what it is. It's an experience. It really is. It's unlike any other ride, I think, to go through. So he's already talking about how the film is very much like the ride, and he really enjoyed that source material, and he liked working on the film because it was close to the source material. He goes on and says, so seeing that the story that I was given paid close attention to detail in that way, it really excited me because I don't enjoy seeing things that aren't the same as the thing that I enjoy. Wow. Love it. Love it. Lakeith Stanfield here. I don't enjoy seeing things that aren't the same as the thing that I enjoy. Yeah, it's almost like if you're going to adapt something, you should actually adapt it rather than trying to create the book that Tolkien never wrote, as we saw with the Rings of Power and everything they did. And I guess that also is another thing there. We have seen people say these things. We've seen the Rings of Power people say things like, we're going back to the book, back to the book, back to the book. And then at the end of the day, you get to see what they actually created, and it's nothing like what Tolkien actually wrote. It's not like what's in the appendices. It's not like what's in the Silmarillion. It's not like in any of that stuff. But so we have to judge, obviously, based on the final product. But I do think that this is worth covering because we are seeing them say things that are right. And you don't even really see Disney ever saying things like that. Usually they're telling you how they're making it for a woke audience and they're changing everything. And they've done it. They're doing everything they can to try and push some kind of messaging or agenda into their films. Whereas this guy's like, we're staying to the source material. And Lakeith Stanfield is here is like, I enjoy things that are to the source material. I don't enjoy things that aren't the same as the source, as the thing that I enjoyed as the source material. So I do really like that. He goes on and says, but at the same time, to Justin's point, that's the director, there was rich, deep storytelling and characters that were compelling. And the way that was able to be merged and married together was unique. And I hadn't read it in a script in a while. So it was really profound to come across this. He then said, and it feels unsettling in just the right way, and I appreciate Disney for taking a step to do something different. So you might be thinking, oh no, red flag, he's saying this is what you were just talking about. He's saying one thing and then going to do another. Or it's Disney saying they're going to do something different. They're going to change it from the source material. But I want to clarify here, he's talking about the 2003 The Haunted Mansion film starring Eddie Murphy and how they're being different from that, which is also obviously different from staying true to the original ride, the original source material, which is what he's talking about earlier, is like his film is trying to stay truer to that source material, to the ride, whereas the 2003 film, in his opinion, or in his estimation, did not do that. I can't comment on that. I don't remember ever seeing that film. And I haven't actually been on the Haunted Mansion experience, so I can't comment on how accurate that was to the film. So just putting that out there. But I do want to make sure that there is nuance here. He is making a distinction here. He says, different in terms of the director. This is a fresh new take on something completely different than the 2003 The Haunted Mansion film starring Eddie Murphy. And we're grateful for the original, but this is something that stands as its own beast, and I'm really happy to have it. He then said, and then sparring with people like Danny DeVito and Owen Wilson, it was hilarious. Rosario Dawson then shared some comments as well, where she compared the film to a ride too. She said, I saw the movie at 10 o'clock in the morning and ended up calling everyone to just gush about the chemistry and the energy and just how perfectly they embody their characters. There's such brilliant moments of just growth and development and nuances of each of these characters in the midst of all of the story. That was like, can be really emotional and suddenly pivot very funny. So that kind of raises a red flag in my opinion right there. That reminds me of like Taika Waititi or James Gunn as humor in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you get these really key moments of tension and then it's broken by some like gag joke and it just ruins all the tension and everything and it just like really falls flat and I just can't stand it. But she does give an example here that I think provides some clarity what she's talking about. She says there's this very striking scene with Lakeith talking about these memories and it gets super emotional. I'm literally starting to tear up and then you cut to his face and his reaction to the story and you're like, how are we going from crying to laughing like this? And so I think right there, what she's talking about is she's talking about maybe he's deadpanning a story to the other people in the mansion with him, and then actually after he finishes the story, that deadpan goes away, and he's clearly like, this is like a joke. I can't believe you people were falling for it, kind of thing. Maybe that's kind of what he's going for. Maybe he's like trying to like spook them out or create a creepy, scary thing for them with like an emotional story, and then it's like, you guys fell for that. That's kind of like maybe where my imagination is going with what she's saying here. Who knows? Maybe I'm completely wrong. But anyways, Dawson says, and you've got jump scares and all kinds of stuff that go on. So the movie, it's a ride. It feels like a ride. So there you have it. Rosario Dawson describing the film as a ride, which I think does echo what Lakeith Stanfield was kind of saying earlier. Obviously not to the extent of what he was saying, but she is comparing the film to a ride. She goes on and says, and I think talking about making that interpretation of the feeling of being in it, this was Walt Disney's, I think, one of the last rides he ever approved of. It didn't even go into use until 2 years after his passing, and it's so interesting reading about the history of it because there was such a fight internally about like how scary do you make it or how funny and spooky, like is it scary or spooky, and what that line is. And I think, Justin, you did just a brilliant job of like holding that line throughout the entire film, and it's so great. So that's important, that comment there, because Justin Simien, the director, does reference it here when he was asked about Easter eggs that he incorporated into the film later on in the interview. He says, I'm a fanboy, like I come from that fandom culture, okay? And especially with something like this, I was like, it only gets richer the truer we are to the source because the source is inspired. You gotta love it. I love what he's saying there. That's a great line. Excellent line. I feel like I've been paraphrasing things like that for a while now when it comes to like DC Comics, Marvel Comics, their adaptations, Tolkien, etc., etc. It does get better the closer you are to the source, and people want they want the source adapted to screen as faithfully as possible. He then referenced Rosario's comments, said, like you were saying, like there was a fight to figure out what the tone of this thing should be, and that fight, that tension creates something really magical about it. So, I mean, everything down to the paintings that were gone and then came back into the ride, like I was clocking those, like, okay, we got to put that into a prominent spot. Everything down to the doorknobs, okay, the way the doors are framed, certainly the wallpaper had to be right, the ghost had to be right. So clearly, huge attention to detail, especially when it comes to the set design and set pieces. Love to see that. That's really good as well. You do want quality set design, but set design doesn't make a good story. Rings of Power, I think, could be an example, even though I don't even think their set designs were really that great to begin with, as much as they lauded them and you had all the press about them. But set design, you can have the greatest set design there is out there, but if you have a really crappy story, then I don't think people are really going to be remembering how great the set design was. But Simeon continues, he says, and the other thing I wanted to bring to it is like a real sense of culturally being placed in New Orleans. Like it was really important to me that, like, we say this is in New Orleans. New Orleans is a very black city and it has many different cultures that come together and mix and find this kind of harmony together, and I absolutely wanted to infuse that sort of authenticity into the ride too. So I really like that. I think that's fine. I mean, I'm sure some people might take issue with that. I do like the fact that he says here that there's a kind of harmony of coming together, whereas like usually what you see from Disney or any of these people promoting their upcoming films or whatever, it's like, no, we're replacing everyone else. There is no harmony. It's only this culture and everything else is lesser or whatever. Whereas this one, it looks like they're actually going to have like a mix of different people. You can see here, because you have like Danny DeVito, you've got Owen Wilson as well. Rosario Dawson definitely looks like she's from a different place than what Tiffany Haddish's character is, and then even Lakeith Stanfield. It looks like they're all kind of coming from different places and bringing that together. So I do like this, and I hope I'm not sounding like a shill, but it is really surprising to me that you get something like this coming out of the Walt Disney Company when usually everything is just so grim. We're changing everything. We're creating for a modern audience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas now we're finally actually hearing someone say, hey, if you stick to the source material, it'll actually be better. So it's good to hear that. But it'll be interesting to see how well this film does. I do think a lot of people are still going to stay away from this just because it is the Walt Disney Company. But who knows? Maybe I'll be surprised on that.